I think it's way more common than we all realize.
To do it anyway, knowing that it's going to eventually help move the needle in the direction that you're wanting to go.
When we actually are able to have conversations with people and like sit down and like lean into our humanity, we realize that it's so common. Like we're not alone, you know?
It just feels so incredibly heavy, and that's just such a burden to have to carry all on your own. Welcome back to another episode of Sessions for the Soul.
Yes, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's feeling very summer-like in terms of like the energy and the busyness of life. And even before we started, it's like it feels like we haven't seen each other in forever, and it's probably been like 2-3 weeks of just kind of like busyness. So it's nice to like have this space.
Yes. Life is like lifing right now for sure. And like I feel like you know, like a lot of things just happened at one time, right? So it's like the busyness, the like schedule changes, things like that. So I feel that for sure.
Coming off of Memorial Day weekend, which is always like fun and busy and full, very full. Life is full.
Which is like, it's like a blessing. And also there are those moments where it's like, whoa, I need to catch my breath.
Yes.
I feel that.
I love in one of the messages you sent me over the last week where you're like, I literally said yes to everything on accident, like without realizing. And it just fills up really quickly.
It does. That is such a real thing. Like when it's like, I'm available for this and that, and okay, I can do that. And then you like sit down and you like look at it and you're like, wait,
what?
Who's going to do all of that? No, I feel that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, very fun. I'm excited for today's episode. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're coming at you at the end of May. But we wanted to be able to touch on mental health awareness. And I think we have a lot of great stuff that we're going to be covering today, just in terms of, signs to look out for, how to support people, tips for your own mental health. And then we're also going to be talking about suicide, warning signs of suicide, and how to support someone who might be struggling in that way, which I think is really important. Because we all have the opportunity to step in and really help someone in a time where they're like desperately needing it.
That's so beautiful. I love that. I feel like this is just coming at the perfect time, especially, you know, there's so much going on in people's lives. And when things get busy is when some of these things can like slip away. And the summers just like naturally got more movement in it and all sorts of stuff. So I'm really excited about this too. I think it'll be good. And our listeners, I hope you guys enjoy this.
Well, should we kick it off with a few stats? I feel like stats sometimes just like really highlight an issue.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So more than 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year, and anxiety disorders being like the most common of those, which doesn't feel surprising that anxiety, like stress, anxiety, and like that category of mental health complications is like the most prominent. So that's millions of people every year, 1 in 5. And that's, if I had to guess, that's actually probably low, like underreported.
Because I think, you know, a lot of people struggle with things or experience things and actually don't realize that that's part of mental health. I think that's one of the things here. And we'll kind of explore like this throughout this episode, but people maybe just think, well, like that's life, or they aren't super aware, or they think like, I think one of the like misconceptions around mental health is that it has to be more severe, and it can be just like such a subtlety, like being anxious or having like, you know, that feeling when you're like a kid, like the Sunday scaries, when like school's coming the next day and you're kind of like, oh, anxious. And you don't really, it's not necessarily like a big, heavy feeling all the time, but it's that like anxiousness and that like change to your nervous system, or maybe your stomach hurts or you feel a little like unsettled. That is mental health, right? And I feel like that can follow us into adulthood in a not so obvious way, right? It's more
Absolutely.
subtle. Yeah.
I thought it was surprising that 50% of lifetime mental health conditions begin by age 14, which is very early in life. And that's also at like a pivotal point in life.
Yeah.
And then 75% by age of 24. So that essentially means like if you're going to experience a mental health condition, it usually is going to occur earlier in your life rather than later in
Yeah.
life.
And
And
that,
usually be carried with you.
yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense in the sense that like a lot of our hardwired like tracks in our brain and pathways are laid by the time we're in our mid, teens,
Yeah.
and like really solidified by our 20s. More recently, we have determined that we can relay the tracks and we can retrain our brain
Right.
to make different connections. However, a lot of that is such unconscious. It's our subconscious doing the work of that. And
Yeah.
so those time frames don't necessarily surprise me. But what I think is interesting is the like relationship we have around what resources we give to young
Yeah.
kids, teenagers. Like 14, I think there's not necessarily a more awkward age, maybe 23.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like 12 to 14 is rough.
It's rough. It's
Yeah.
hard. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that, getting, if you get tools brought to you, like some people have more resources, or if there are family members or people in their life getting them resources to get through that, I think that that's where like, maybe it alters the trajectory of the
Yes. Yeah.
struggle or what happens with that mental health condition.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a really interesting, just piece of data.
It
Data.
is. Yeah. Either one.
I know.
I
but
use both.
me
Data,
too.
data, I don't know.
Depends on who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. Oh, I love that. But yeah, what was another interesting point about this is that only half of the people affected ever seek help. And that's crazy. That's a really low number.
It is, yeah. And I think it also really highlights like the staggering number of like literally millions of people, at least 20% of people that you associate with are struggling with mental health, and most of those people will not seek help. And so these are like your friends, your family, your coworkers, your spouse, your children, like these people are struggling, and not necessarily in ways that you can even recognize that seem like super obvious, but are struggling silently and in isolation and aren't necessarily reaching out for support, it feels really sad to think about that, like how many people aren't reaching out for support. And just to touch back on what you said about like being able to lay new pathways, I think the approximately 50% of people who are seeking help and going to therapy or choosing a medication route or a combination of different things, like they have the opportunity to see that come to fruition of like, I actually can start building a new pathway within my nervous system, within my brain, within my mental health, and experience hope.
Yeah.
And for the people who aren't seeking help, I just think about how hopeless and lonely that might feel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot to carry on your own.
Yeah.
Because even talking about it with a friend or a loved one or someone that's a safe space for you, like that is seeking help, right?
Yeah.
Like being able to find a space to share or kind of like talk through or just get it out of your own experience, out of your own head, essentially.
Yeah.
That is sad because like think of how many people are just carrying that silently, or maybe don't even know like that's what's happening for them, because there is stigma around these things, unfortunately, still, or there are factors like access or cost or awareness, right? Like there's all these things contributing to why someone may or may not be able to talk about it, get the help that they need. And it is just one of those things that I think it's like so many things in the world where when we actually are able to have conversations with people and like sit down and like lean into our humanity, we realize that it's so common. Like we're not alone, we're not the only one walking around with this. It feels like that sometimes, especially the more isolated we are, and especially if we're not talking about it or naming it to tame it or
Yeah.
doing anything to like get it out of our head. And I think that that's kind of where things can get dangerous, right? Is in that isolation point.
Yeah, because you feel so incredibly alone. And
Yeah.
if we're looking at like the spectrum of like, okay, I have a little anxiety and maybe I feel alone in this and I'm not sharing it with people. But then if you look at the extreme end of the spectrum and you feel like despair and hopeless and like there's no way out, and
Yeah.
you're not sharing that with anyone, and you have no one who's saying like, hey, I've been there too, or I'm actually in the same place or a similar place as you right now, it just feels so incredibly heavy. And that's just such a burden to have to carry all on your own.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just like having the ability to normalize some of it, I think is so helpful.
Yes. And that is why we have a whole month dedicated to mental health awareness, right? Because it's like the
Yeah.
more this is like a conversation. It's so interesting too, because generationally, I think the conversation is different.
Yeah.
But it's like such an important conversation. We all experience it, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's on the small scale or the big scale, there is ways that we're experiencing some form of, you know, mental health. And some people are super resilient and their breaking point is like way far down the line
Yeah.
as to where someone else's breaking point might be. It's a different threshold.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just, I'm glad we're having this conversation today.
Me too. I was thinking too, before we move on to some of the like signs that someone might be struggling, I was thinking about just some of the like barriers to people seeking help, and some of that being the like cultural barriers, not necessarily like race and ethnicity, although that too, but even the culture within your family
Yes.
or within your community of like, how much do we actually talk about mental health? Do we talk about our emotions? Do we share when we're struggling? Do we keep all this a secret? Do we pride ourselves in keeping this a secret and like pretending like everything's fine? Like, what does the culture of mental and emotional health look like within the context of your personal life?
Yeah.
And how is that impacting your ability to actually seek help and seek support? And even some of the verbiage, like when we started out saying 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness, like that word or that phrase can feel like so like there's can be resistance with that phrase.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's changing the verbiage that you're using,
Yeah.
or finding a way where it feels like you're able to talk about it, where there's less stigma, and more like openness around the situation.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good point. Like the labels that we use like really affect the context in which we experience that thing, or like our willingness to like to sit in the discomfort of something. And like whether it's like because of whatever factor, right? Like gender, age, whatever, some of those words can feel really sticky. And I feel like the more we can like kind of like illness feels heavy and almost like there's something like wrong.
Right.
And I think that that's part of this conversation too, is right. Like, there's nothing wrong if you're struggling with these things.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
There's something that's contributing to your experience,
Right.
and that might need to be like addressed, adjusted. You know, it might be time. It might be a place to look deeper and see like what's actually happening for me. Why am I feeling this way? But it doesn't mean that you're wrong, you're broken, like there's something wrong with you, because that can feel so like also hopeless or debilitating, because it's like, oh, I'm the problem, or this thing about me is like I can't get away from it. I'm stuck with it.
Yeah.
And that's not the case necessarily.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much wrapped into all of that and why someone may or may not seek help.
Yeah.
Should we talk about some of the signs?
Yes, definitely.
So like we've already mentioned, like one of the misconceptions is that if someone is struggling with mental health, it's going to be super obvious. And that's, again, like we just really want to highlight that's not always the case, whether it be kind of some of these lesser intense emotional experiences or some of these really extreme emotional experiences, including suicidal thoughts. And so you don't always know if someone's struggling, but there are often little signs or sometimes bigger signs that we can kind of keep an eye out for, which is always super important. So, number one, withdrawing from people or activities. So, if you have people in your life who are generally, engaging with you socially or reaching out often or responding to your messages or engaging in activities and things that they love, and they start to really pull back from that,
Mm-hmm.
that's a red flag that something might be going on. Maybe they're just a little overwhelmed in life.
Yeah.
Maybe they just like haven't been able to check their messages or commit to different activities or whatever. But sometimes it can be like an external sign that something is going on internally.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if the person in question is someone who consistently has shown up, like does respond
Yes.
promptly, is involved in things, is really involved in community, and then all of a sudden they've like really pulled back. Obviously there's like a number of factors and why someone might do that. However, like for the sake of this conversation being about mental health, um, that's kind of a big warning sign because
Yeah.
we are able to track one another's patterns, or if we're close with someone and they've shown up one way and we're used to that, and then all of a sudden we notice a big withdrawal or change, that's definitely something to notice, like
Yeah.
changes in patterns, activities, behaviors, etc.
Yeah, and sometimes it can just be as simple as like reaching out and just being like, "Hey, are you doing okay? Like
Yeah.
I've noticed you've kind of been, hanging back from different things that we usually do, or haven't heard from you very much lately, wanted to check in." Like just
Yes.
that simple like bid for connection can be
Yes.
really helpful.
No, totally. It's sometimes it's just like, hey, you crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you good?
Yeah.
Little things like that. And because in that moment too, like that person who is maybe struggling or dealing with isolation or whatever, that might be like, oh gosh, I'm so glad you sent me that. I needed
Yeah.
this right now.
Yeah.
And they also might not respond or
Mhm.
be just depending on what they're struggling with, but absolutely. Another sign that someone might be struggling is increased irritability or emotional reactivity. If someone is, you know, at work or in their home life, this is an indicator, is like, are you being short with someone? Is someone being short with you? Is the capacity to like
Yeah.
move through life changed? Because, like sometimes we're tired and cranky. Okay, that might be a different thing. But if
Right.
it's consistently like the build up, it's almost like for whatever reason, I'm like getting the visual of like a volcano, like the pressure building.
Yeah. Like what is it, the
The
magma or
magna,
whatever
yeah.
underneath. Yeah.
Yeah, the pressure builds, right? And then if someone is struggling, that pressure and that like struggle is going to keep building
Yeah.
until there has to be release, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's a sign to look out for, is a consistent increase in irritability, irritability and shortness, and maybe like temperament changes.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. And like you mentioned, like the pattern is really important because maybe someone's like a little grouchy here and there, fine.
Right.
But like if someone consistently has like really changed quite a bit in how they're interacting with you, that would be something to kind of check in on and just like see how that person's doing. Because again, like you mentioned, the capacity that someone has, like maybe there's so much going on externally that feels so overwhelming, or different things going on in life that are just like reducing their capacity to like respond to everyday stressors or little irritations, and they're like having these big reactions to things that don't really warrant that and
Yeah.
that they would usually handle more
Yes.
gracefully.
Yeah, what's coming to mind right now is kind of like when you're a parent and like
Yeah.
you start to have less capacity for your
Yeah.
kids, like just being kids are coming to talk to you, and then like the outbursts or even a spouse, right?
Yeah.
Those little moments, like that can be really an indicator that someone is like struggling. And if you're a bystander witnessing this, or if you're close to that person, that is a great time to say like, hey, what can I help with? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Is there something I can do to help
Yeah.
you in this season of life? Or
Yeah.
are you okay? Yeah,
Yeah.
creating dialogue around it, I think, is the most important thing.
For sure.
But yeah.
Love that. Sleep and appetite changes. This is something that you're not gonna notice maybe within like friends or coworkers or anything like that. But if people are in your home and you're
Yeah.
noticing like, hey, like you're sleeping quite a bit lately.
Yeah.
What's going on? Or like I've noticed you've been under eating or overeating or undersleeping or oversleeping. Like things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually a sign of maybe like increased stress, increased anxiety, maybe some symptoms of depression. Like when there's a substantial change. And again, that's not just like, oh, you had one night of bad sleep or like we
Right.
like did some binge eating this weekend. Like this is a pattern that you start to notice, and where again you can kind of bring it to the forefront of the situation and be like, hey, I'm noticing this. Like, what's going on? How can I support you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important distinction of like, we have one-off situations that happen.
Yeah.
That happens,
Yeah.
but it's the consistency and like if a pattern is forming and a habit is like being created around it, that can really be a sign that someone might be slumping into like,
Yeah.
whether it's depression or like an anxiety episode or even like mania is part of this as well.
Yeah.
Like it could be like staying up all night and like, like not sleeping and kind of being like constantly like wired almost. These are things that, and again, like you said, you might not notice this if you don't live with someone or if you like are really close to them and know their patterns. But for those of us who, if you live with people or if you have a family, these are really good indicators to kind of keep track of, especially I feel like in teenagers and like people in their 20s. In adult life, it can be a little bit harder because a lot of people struggling in adult life are still like functioning. They're going to work.
Yes.
They're doing all of the things they're committed to. But when you have young kids or maybe your kid is in their 20s, these are things to kind of really tune into.
Sure.
Another one is just low energy and constant exhaustion. This is one that I feel like is a good indicator. Like if someone is consistently, I think one of the themes in this episode will be like, obviously people have patterns and ways that they've shown up. It's the change in pattern or like the consistent change in something that lets us know like, okay, maybe something's off here. But like fatigue is such a real thing. Like even if this is a big one, I think for even ourselves, like if you're struggling with mental health to tune into, if you are like constantly exhausted, but like really your what's on your plate hasn't really changed. That's a really big indicator that like, hey, your body is like asking for something right now or something's not aligned. And it's a place to get curious.
For sure. Yes. And that's just it too. Like from your own self, like getting curious about some of these symptoms. Like if you're listening and you're like, wow, I'm checking a lot of these boxes. Like it's an opportunity to get kind of curious about what might be going on. And then from another person's perspective too, like if you're trying to step in and support, doing it from a place of like genuine curiosity and care for the other person of like, hey, I'm noticing this, like I'm kind of curious what's going on, curious how I can support you, rather than looking at it through the lens of like something's wrong with you or like in an accusatory manner or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Difficulty concentrating, loss of motivation. These are, again, things like feeling a little apathetic, not motivated to do the things that you usually do, not super excited about the things that you usually do, difficulty focusing on different tasks. And again, like if this falls outside of what's within like your normal range, I guess, those could be some red flags as well.
Yeah, this reminds me of like, if you're someone who, like perhaps your job, right? Like it requires you to focus and do certain things. Like if you're experiencing a phase or a season of life where like you're not getting anything done, and I'm using air quotes for those of you who are just listening and not watching, like you're not getting anything accomplished, but all day your brain is like on the hamster wheel and you're really busy and exhausted. That's a good indicator that like, hey, there might be something going on here because sometimes, especially like if you struggle with ADHD or you're having a tough time like with anxiety, the thought train can be like where the overwhelm, like I have a lot to do, I'm overwhelmed by what I have to do, and now I'm not doing anything, but I'm like on the hamster wheel and I'm like exhausting myself mentally.
Yeah.
Because there's also a difference between like physical exhaustion
Yes.
and
Yeah.
mental exhaustion. When you're physically exhausted, it's like maybe you worked really hard in the yard, or you worked out really hard, or you went on a big hike, or you like went on vacation and there was like a lot of doing.
Yeah.
That's physical exhaustion
Yeah.
to where like, okay, your body is like, hey, I literally need sleep to function. Like we need a rest.
Yeah.
Versus mental exhaustion is almost like a restless feeling,
Yeah.
where your body, like you might not have even moved from like really your house or like moved from a certain spot all day. But you are so tired. And that's because your brain, of the 80,000 to 100,000 thoughts that we have a day, which is insane when we really think about that, because of those thoughts. Like, I think it's like, I don't remember the exact number, but I remember it being like kind of on the higher end, like 70% of them or 80% of them are unconscious, right? If we're like on that hamster wheel and we're like spinning constantly and we're exhausting ourselves with those, with the thoughts and with the like what I'm not getting done or what I should be doing or what's wrong or whatever it is, right? That exhaustion and like lack of motivation that comes from that is a good place to like notice and get curious. And we will share, as we, in a minute, we'll share some like tips of how to deal with all of this. But
for sure.
Yeah, I love that point. The next one is increase substance use. Yeah, this is such an important one because I think that it's such a tricky thing. I think like culturally, socially, like this can look different for everybody, because of like what we normalize in our day-to-day lives or in our like social circles or in even culturally, like in our families or in our actual culture. So substance use, if if someone you love or someone you know or yourself is someone who doesn't really drink or doesn't really do whatever the thing is, and there's like a huge increase in that and like a huge increase in dissociation, that's a red flag, right? That's an indicator that like maybe something's wrong. And also I would argue that like if you're someone who consistently is using substances and has like your whole, maybe it's like a normal part of your life. I'm not saying this is the case with everybody, but I would invite curiosity around why like that's the constant, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Because ultimately substances offer an opportunity to kind of unplug from the discomfort that you're feeling. Or offer like pleasure, excitement, depending on the substance that you're using. And so, what is it bringing to me? What is it bringing to my life, whether it be pleasure or relief? Also, I would add, like, if someone that you know is in recovery and you notice them using substances again, that would, of course, be a red flag as well. So,
yes.
And I think that kind of connects to the next one, of just kind of feeling numb, hopeless, disconnected. A lot of that will be interconnected with the other symptoms that we've talked about. And then also maybe it's actually in the language that someone's using of like, I'm feeling so hopeless. I'm feeling so like at a loss of like what to do at this stage of my life, or whatever the language is that people are using that are kind of indicating that they're feeling disconnected, hopeless, just so burnt out from it all.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I think that there's like a difference in like being in a transitional phase and being like, I'm figuring it out, I'm not sure. And being like, no, like, being in the phase of life that you're in and like not feeling like there's a point, or like not feeling lost in that, like, I don't want to do this, but I don't care to change it. That can also be like, if someone's not like actively like, yeah, this isn't working, let's see what would work. That's an indicator as well that kind of goes with that of like someone's willingness to look at something or like get help with something, or even be like, this isn't working for me, I need to figure out what is. That's almost like a good sign.
Yes. It's like a sign of hope, resilience.
Yes. A sign of like, okay, and now I need to like evaluate and just pivot here. And that, so it doesn't, it might look just different depending on the circumstances, but yes, I love that. And then this one, which we kind of talked about, is the functioning outwardly while internally overwhelmed. And I think that this is that thing we talked about of like the adults that you might know who are showing up to work, still doing all the things, like
Yeah.
getting the kids to school, showing up for their spouse, like going. But that can sometimes be like the distraction. That can be the disassociation that isn't a substance, right?
Yeah.
That can be the moment where it's like, oh, this person's like buried
Yes.
and they're like, they are functioning really highly, but on the inside, internally, like
Yeah.
they're not actually prioritizing self-care or rest, or they're not eating health, like they're not doing things that nourish them. And so like that is depletion.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, that can look like almost like, it's weird because our culture kind of praises that a little bit, the hustle culture of it all.
Yeah.
So this is a tricky one, but if you or a loved one is experiencing that, or you see them like really like buried and whatever, and like almost um like they dove headfirst into something and they're like so like tunnel vision on that project,
Mhm.
that can be a time to be like, hey, I just want to check on you. Are you okay? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I know you've been really focused, but like, how are you outside of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Should we talk a little bit about like self-harm? Maybe differentiating for the sake of this conversation between like self-harm and self-injury, like self-injury being
Yes.
like cutting, burning, headbanging, like different ways of literally harming yourself, not for the purpose of suicide
Yeah.
or ending your life, but for the purpose of just self-injury
Yeah.
versus self-harm. I don't know if you want to kind of speak to some of the things that people might
Yeah.
notice in that realm.
Yeah, definitely. This has actually been on my mind a lot lately because I think like unfortunately, I mean, there's a group of people who probably have a great understanding of this, like psychologists, therapists,
Yeah.
things like that. Outside of that, the general population, I'm not sure that we have a great understanding of self-harm and what that can look like. So, I love the distinction you made of like self-injury versus self-harm. Because I think we think of self-harm as like self-injury,
Right.
but self-harm can also look right? Um, like self-harm can look like obsessing over something, like obsessive exercise, like obsessing over what we're eating or how we're eating. Self-harm can look like, you know, engaging in a behavior or a pattern that we know is harmful to ourselves. So like an example of that might be um, engaging in a relationship that we know is toxic, but keep coming back to because like that's
Yeah.
for whatever reason, that can be self-harm. Ignoring our bodies, like if we're experiencing physical pain or an injury and we're, you know, continuing to push our body past that point and ignore what is needed for the sake of like whatever, that can be self-harm. Being addicted to working, self-harm can be financial, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it can be so many things. And so I think the important distinction to make here for anybody listening who maybe isn't sure about like maybe you have a loved one who you're concerned about, or um you know engages in certain behaviors that isn't great for them, or for yourself, it's like dissecting and looking at, is this just like a habit or a pattern or whatever? Or is this like from a place of self-harm? And the reason this has been on my mind is because, you know, I have that there are people in my life where I've just noticed, even in myself, right? Like there are certain behaviors that over the years I've like worked past, or things that I no longer engage in, but like the tendency or the desire maybe comes up to engage in those things, where it's like I'm uncomfortable, or I do want to disassociate from my life, or something's happening, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, that would feel, oh, you know what? It's almost like self-destructive behavior to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, I know this isn't good for me, but I'm going to do it.
Right.
That is self-harm. And yeah, I would get curious with yourself, like for our listeners or anyone, just about like what patterns or what like things am I, when I'm struggling, do I reach for that maybe aren't actually helping me get out of this or nourishing me in a
Yeah.
greater way, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I think there's almost like a thread from what you just described to addiction,
Yeah.
from like through the lens of engaging in something over and over, knowing that it's causing harm to your life and still doing it anyway because it's
Yeah.
so hard to get out of that cycle. And so yeah, it's good to like be aware of those things within yourself, and then to also kind of notice if someone else is maybe demonstrating some of those patterns.
Yeah, I think addiction is like such an important part of this conversation too, because if you struggle with addiction, just because you're sober does not mean
Mm-hmm.
you're, like we always, like we hear the term dry drunk,
Right.
or, I mean, I haven't necessarily like heard the term like dry, like, or sober addict. But it is
Right.
that, right? It's like the, um, I don't, it's like I'm not doing insert substance here anymore. And so I'm doing like what's best for me, but I am doing this other thing that kind of gives me the same sensation, or
Right.
I've replaced this addiction
Yeah.
with another addiction. And I have like addiction, such a strong relationship with addiction in my family and in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like been a thing that I've got to observe over the years of the people in my life who have gotten sober,
Yeah.
or who no longer participate in, like, it's mostly been alcohol, in my family, but the
Mm-hmm.
people who are sober, there sometimes is still that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, my dad is a great example. And he says this, like, this is a very real thing
Mm-hmm.
that I'm sharing this information with permission. But
Mm-hmm.
he replaced his addiction to alcohol with work. And like, that is like such a
Mm-hmm.
clear thing. And that actually was a big part of this inspiration of self-harm for me, because, um, I like, I really had a aha moment, and I was like, hey, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
This is self-harm. What are you doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're addicted, to working. And his body, he's older, like he needs a hip replacement, things like that, to where like he'll just like work himself to where he literally can't stand up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, dude,
Yeah.
this is self-harm, buddy.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
we
It's
love
just not in
him.
a bottle
No,
anymore.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
not in a
Or can or
bottle.
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason I'm sharing this and bringing this up in this conversation is for our listeners, or even if, whether it's a loved one or yourself, to tune into that, because that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And it can be just as harmful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about some warning signs of suicide. Everything that we've talked about thus far could be included in some of what we're going to talk about right now as well, or coming up. But usually, warning signs of suicide are going to be a little more prominent. Not always.
Yeah.
Not always. But there are some distinctions. The first is something that we've kind of talked about a little bit, but the feeling of being hopeless, feeling like such a burden, feeling trapped, like that a lot of times isn't going to be something that's observed, but is something in the language that people are using, sharing like, I just feel like such a burden to everyone. I feel like such a burden to my family or to my employers or whatever the case is, or I just feel like there's no way out. So that kind of language is really important to kind of really tune into when someone starts talking like that.
Yeah, I love that you just said feeling like there's no way out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a really good indicator that someone is deep in a
Mm-hmm.
hole or emotionally really
Yeah.
struggling.
No.
Um, yeah, another warning sign would be increased isolation. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is really real. When people withdraw from life, from their jobs, from um, just connection, community,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, right? And we've already covered that, like, that might look different for everybody, and like everyone's patterns and consistencies are different. But if someone is withdrawing, like in a way that is like obvious to where it's like, hey, I haven't seen this person in weeks, months. That can be a sign, yeah, for sure, that they are really fighting something, or even like, deep into whatever they're into, to where it's just like, they don't even, they're checking out, they're
Yeah.
deep in it. And so this is something, to notice and to look out for. And I know we've already kind of talked about that a little bit, but, I would say that that's one of the, even if they're not isolated, even if they're still showing up for everything and there, but they're feeling isolated, that's a sign for ourselves to look at, of like, oh, I might be in a room full of people, but I'm feeling completely alone. And I feel like I'm like watching everything in slow motion, or,
like you're an observer. Like,
yes, that is that's a sign that there's a struggle going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Sudden mood changes, again, this is something to look out for outside of whatever is the norm for that person. But I think especially like something to note is calmness after a period of big distress. And what that can signify is like someone feeling at peace with their decision of like, you know what? I'm actually not going to have to deal with this anymore because I'm going to in my life.
Yeah.
And so for some people, that decision to take their own life can bring a sense of a false sense, but a sense of like calmness and peace. And so you might observe that within someone who's gone through like a major life disruption or something really big in their life, where it's like, yeah, it makes sense that you're like really distressed or really stressed about this, or upset, or whatever the case is. And then all of a sudden they just feel like a total sense of ease about the situation. That would be a really big red flag for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that human desire to, have a solution, and like our sometimes our brains, when we don't have the tools or the support to get out of something or to work through something, our brains are like, oh, obviously,
right.
like,
It feels like the only way out.
Exactly. And I think that like it does look like calmness, peace, or like almost like resolution.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that like kind of goes with that is like saying goodbye, giving away possessions. If someone's like giving away all their stuff, or like maybe the goodbye you have with them is like weirdly intimate and like very like almost feels final. That's a big indication to like ask. It's uncomfortable for sure. I'm going to just normalize this right now. It is super uncomfortable to be like, hey, are you okay? Or to say like, hey, are you thinking about taking your own life? I'm really worried about you.
Yeah.
But to be brave and to do that, it actually, like, I'm not even being dramatic here. It saves lives.
It literally does.
It literally saves lives.
Yeah.
It literally can snap someone out of whatever they're in and make their brain be like, oh shit, like someone sees me.
Yes.
And someone can see what's going on. And
they know how much pain I'm in.
Yeah. Yes. And even if that person doesn't divulge in that moment, maybe they're like, oh no, like I'm good or whatever, I would follow up.
Yeah.
I would send a follow-up message or check on them the next day. Just because it's like, no, but seriously, I love you and I care about you and I want you here.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
The people that are brave to do that, you're fucking heroes. I'm serious. I know a few people who have done that. I know people that have done that for me when I've been struggling, and it actually seriously makes such a difference. And so just normalizing and if they're like, what? No, I'm not thinking about killing myself. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. We can like joke or like laugh about this, that like, sorry, I went there. Like, but ultimately, like, either way, what you're doing is like just creating room for conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Again, increased substance use or reckless behavior in terms of like, I'm going to do all these crazy things that I usually don't do because I don't care if I die or not. Actually, it'd be great if I did. And so like taking huge risks and that way could be a big red flag. Also, on the note of substance use, a lot of times when people attempt suicide, they're under the influence of a substance. I think usually alcohol actually is like one of the top Substances, yeah. So increased substance use combined with all of these things, huge red flag to look out for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another one is talking about death frequently. Um, and like, sometimes we go through like phases of like like when a loved one dies or if you have a family member die, sometimes that can bring to the forefront like the experience of
Sure.
death.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say every time, but in the context of mental health or like someone, and especially in the context of these other behaviors,
Yeah.
if someone is talking about death a lot or when they die,
Yeah.
or kind of communicating like, oh, well, their plans for when they die, like,
Getting things in order.
yes, like,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, when I die, I want this to go here. And I want, I hope that like, or
Yeah.
communicating a funeral plan or whatever,
Yeah.
especially if they're like not dealing with death in that way.
Yeah.
That's definitely a red flag and something to get curious about, ask questions about, check in on them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Same with researching methods or making plans. And again, this is not something that you might be immediately aware of, but you can kind of pick up on some of the cues based on maybe things that they're sharing, or if things that you see in the search history, if something pops up, things that they just seem like really super interested in right now, that usually like it's not like them to be interested in these things, like just noting again some of
Yeah.
those patterns in conjunction with these other warning signs.
Yes. And with that, I want to add, like, one, if you're a parent of teenagers, you need to be going through your kids' search history.
Oh, absolutely.
You need to be going through your kids' search history. Like,
Yeah.
the amount of people who are not in their kids' devices worries me, concerns me deeply. If you have young adults in your life, you need to be aware of what they're consuming on the internet and what they're looking up and what they're involved in, because the warning signs can 100% be there,
Yeah.
and like likely are there, especially if they're chronically online.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
two, another indicator, this is not just for teenagers, this is for adults as well, is like what the content they're consuming. I would argue like music is a huge indicator. If someone,
Mm-hmm.
now as a girl I love sad songs. And arguably, you guys, I don't think it's the best for me. It's a part of me that I love. And my mom always has joked about this. She's like, do you think you're struggling right now because we've only heard Connor Oberst on repeat for like a year? Like, are you good? And
Right.
she's always kind of done that, because even when I was a kid, I love a sad song. But there's a difference between like kind of a poetic kind of song, versus like music that feels like it is encouraging hopelessness. It is encouraging like substance use, like, certain genres or certain artists really like have like, I would almost say like suicide core music.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a red flag.
Absolutely.
And even if it doesn't feel like a red flag, especially if it's like a loved one or a child in your life, a teenager specifically, I would invite conversation around like, hey, can I ask you why you like this artist or why you like this song? Like, what resonates about this with you?
Yeah.
And, as someone who loves you, I just want to know like what your relationship to this is and if I should be concerned, because I love you and I want you here.
Yeah. So good. Such an important point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Let's see. Loss of interest or in life or future plans. Again, this is because a decision has been made, right? Like, I don't need to make future plans because I'm not going to be here. Sometimes that's immediate, like I'm not making plans for the next few weeks, like it's a pretty short timeline. Sometimes people I've encountered just through previous work of like, I don't see myself living past this age. I'm not making plans past 30. I'm not going to be here. I already have plans to take my life.
Yeah.
And that could be years away from the time that they're sharing that, but they already have plans to end it at some point. So that's a sign.
Definitely. That's a really important point, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And normalizing, I think, having conversations around that, because I also think like, I don't know, generationally, I feel like, I've heard that, oh, I'm not going to live past 70. Well, what? What do you mean? How do you know?
Yeah.
What? How do you know?
Yeah.
And so I think like, again, it's just invitation for more conversation and curiosity, but definitely that's a big one. And then just a note we wanted to add is that there's a difference, right, between suicidal ideation and struggling like with actually wanting to take your own life. Suicidal ideation doesn't always necessarily mean that you actually want to die, but it's an indicator that you're seeking relief from emotional pain. So suicidal ideation might be like, you know, the stress is high, or you really don't like your job, or there's something just off in life, relationships, whatever, right? Insert thing here. And like, it's uncomfortable. And especially when you're in the immediate experience of the discomfort,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
But suicidal ideation, a key differentiator in these things is suicidal ideation doesn't usually involve, and like, I mean, it doesn't involve actually making plans, having ideas around how you would take your own life. It's really more about like, I want to escape this emotional experience, but I do want to live. Like I have goals, I have dreams, I'm working toward things.
Yeah.
But our brains really do, you know, we have an animal brain, and the animal brain can't comprehend like all the time. It can't comprehend like, oh, I can go get tools to work through this anxiety, or I can go get tools to work through this, or this is really uncomfortable and I need to make a decision to get out of it or to change my reality. And instead the brain is just like, I'm going to kill myself.
Yeah.
And that is a lot different than someone who does not want to be alive. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I'm almost picturing like a spectrum in some ways, and that might be a little too soft in terms of how to describe all this. But I'm thinking about even previous clients who had like a history of kind of fantasizing or like daydreaming about not being here anymore, and maybe how they would do it, but they would never actually do it,
Yeah.
right? Like I have deep resolve that I'm actually never going to take action on this, but I kind of keep it in my back pocket as like, this is always an option for me. And I kind of daydream about it. And I remember at the time, this was years ago, thinking or hearing the mental health professional at the time talking about this as like, some people have that almost like as a coping skill to know there actually is always an out. I'm never going to act on it, but it, for me, for whatever reason, helps me just remember like everything's actually going to be okay. And so that's just an interesting thing to think about. I think it would still be a red flag if there's someone in your life who's like constantly fantasizing. Check in with them, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But then they're the other end of the spectrum being like, I have thoughts, I have a plan, I have an intent, I have the means to do it. That's like the, you know, like someone who's ready to take action. And so in some ways it lies on a spectrum. But for the sake of this, like all of it is worth looking into a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of it is worth being curious about for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether that's for yourself, like if any of this resonates with you, or you maybe have, like, as you're hearing this, you're like, oh, I have suicidal ideation. Like, I think I'm going to kill myself sometimes or whatever.
Yeah.
One thing that I think is a really important tool or just thing to like bring into your life, if that's your reality, is to really have curiosity around it.
Yeah.
Like ask yourself questions. Do I understand the magnitude of this thought, this decision? Do I actually not want to be on earth, or what's really happening here? And then also, this is something that I've used, and my therapist taught me years ago, is like I have like a what's the word, like a almost like a meter of like, okay, if the thought I want to kill myself is crossing my mind too many times, like if it's, you know, if it's like once a month or like once a week, maybe it's like, okay, like, oh yeah, there's that thought that like, it's one of my repetitive thoughts or whatever. Like that's there. If it is increasing in frequency, that's an indicator. If it's gone from like, oh yeah, it crosses my mind every once in a while to, the first thought in my head when I wake up is I want to kill myself, that is an indicator. So for your, like, for our listeners and for anybody who's seeking some support on this, get a good understanding of yourself and your own like patterns and like where you're at when you're really good and where you're at when you're really bad and what the in between of that is, so that you can track that. Because like for me personally, an increase in that passing, that intrusive thought,
Yeah.
means like I need to tell someone I need help. And it's
Yeah.
not like, it's not always like you said, it's that spectrum. It's not like I'm going to, I know myself, I know like my boundaries and my limits with it. However, there is a point where I feel uncomfortable with the frequency of a thought. And I know
Yeah.
that that's a point where I should say to my therapist, like, hey,
Yeah.
this is frequently happening, or like, hey, this is turned
Yeah.
up a bit. And I'm not trying to like minimize or like make this like a light, jokey topic. Cause it's not, obviously. And also, like, we have to be able to have these conversations and
For
be like
sure.
normal about it and have levity to these things, because it's
Yeah.
like reality, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm picturing like a smoke detector that's like chirping because the battery needs to be changed, and it starts out pretty slow and it's just like, hey, I'm here, like remember to change me, like I'm here, and then it starts to increase and it's like,
Yes.
okay, yeah, like I need to actually do something about this now.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
Um I think another thing, just in terms of like risk factors too, that might be helpful to touch on is like if someone has a history of attempts in the past, that would be a big red flag if you start noticing like the ramping up of some of these symptoms. Or if even in their family history, if there's a family history of suicide, that's it does increase your risk factor within
Yeah.
yourself. And so those are things to be aware of. And then also just noticing like other risk factors that might include, really big life changes, divorce, separation, death of a loved one, big financial stress, loss of a job, lost their house, like really big changes that people are experiencing. And then you start to notice these patterns of like, okay, now you're isolating, or you're like super distressed, or all the different warning signs that we've talked about. Those are important to kind of be aware of. And
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, just to touch on one more time to normalize, like, don't be afraid to ask, are you suicidal? Are you thinking about suicide? Um, the more that we talk about it, I think sometimes the misconception is like, well, if I say it, I'm going to like put the idea in their head to do it. And that's just not true. Like
Yeah.
it's literally the opposite response, like you've shared, of like, it actually makes you feel so seen.
Yes.
And it like puts it out on the table of like, oh, okay, we can talk about this.
Yeah.
Even if the answer is no, like, oh no, I'm actually not suicidal, but thanks for asking,
Yeah.
just being able to like take that step
Mm-hmm.
is so important, and being brave and bold and risking like being that friend or that person who's like going to ask the hard questions. It's fine if it means saving someone's life.
No, seriously, it is. And it's also like, I think it's way more common than we all realize.
Yes.
And part of this like misconception is the lack of discussion around it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's like taboo to talk about it.
totally. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's like the thing that like, and I think especially like working in like the world of therapy or like
Yeah.
mental health and help and addiction, right? Like
Yeah.
you become aware of actually like how many people are like literally out here, even if it's just the intrusive thought.
Yes.
Like suicide is on people's minds.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's on everyone's mind, but it's on a lot more minds than we think.
Yeah.
I think that like the taboo part is we think like, oh, that's like the dirty thought we're not supposed to have, or we're not supposed to think it. And like
Only those people have that thought.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like so much more common
Yeah.
than we think. And when we can just like break down those barriers
Yeah.
and realize that, that's a huge step.
Yeah.
And exactly like you said, like just having the conversation creates that space. So many people I've talked to, friends, loved ones, like when we're able to like really put down like our egos and and the fear and the stigma around that, and just be like, oh, well, I struggle with this. And it's like, oh, well, so do I. Oh,
Yeah.
and then it's like, well, wait a second. Like you're struggling with this. I'm struggling with this. Why are we not talking about it together? And why are we not like finding a way to navigate through this? And also just like, I'm really sorry. I know how hard that is and how heavy that is. I love you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's part of it too. And with that, I will say, if you have someone in your life who you're seeking support from who doesn't understand it,
Yeah.
that can be hard. So
Really
I
hard, yeah.
really recommend finding someone, um, you know, or seeking support from a therapist or someone who
Yeah.
has the knowledge and tools to help you through it, especially when our people, if the person we're talking to really doesn't get it. Because
Yeah.
there are people who haven't thought that, or who really don't have the uh who haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
And so that might be harder for them to hold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you ask someone, are you suicidal? And they say yes, and you're like, okay, but now what?
Yes.
Let us help you.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
if they actually do say yes, there's several different options. Number one, obviously, like be so supportive and caring and loving in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
You could offered like the suicide hotline number 988 is something that like you could offer to call with them together. You can have them call in a separate room, or like if you're with the person, or just recommend that they call. That's a good support, but there's also more local support. I know in our community and a lot of communities, like we have a small community and we have this. So I think it's fairly common in a lot of counties across
Yeah.
the nation, a local mobile crisis team. And the name of that will be different in different communities, but it's kind of like the suicide hotline number, but local, where they can talk to you on the phone and even come out and meet with you.
Yeah, be with you.
Yes. And that's free for you to do. And so you could look up for your specific area. Usually it's through like a community mental health program of some sort, and they'll have a mobile crisis team. Um, you could also ask, if you feel comfortable asking, like if they say, yes, I am having suicidal thoughts, you can ask more specifically, like, do you actually have a plan? Like, have you thought about what you're going to do? And if they start talking about, yeah, I do have a plan, or I have thought about at least what I would do. I have these materials, I have access to these weapons, I have XYZ thing in place. That's a time for like direct intervention. Like,
Yeah.
we need to get you to the emergency room for observation. We need to remove the weapons or the materials that you have. Like, we need active intervention in this phase.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I think that like that's like one of the big differentiators of where someone is at in their crisis.
Yes.
And another like side of this too is how we show up for someone when we're asking these questions. And so it can be really hard. And I just want to normalize that for anybody who maybe has dealt with this, or who doesn't know how to navigate this and maybe will navigate it or whatever in the future. But just reminders to like be a safe and supportive presence. Try not to give too much advice.
Yeah.
Try not to judge. And also really try not to like, well, it'll pass. Like, try not to minimize. I think that that's a really big part of this is let's not minimize their experience, because the thing is if someone is carrying this and dealing with this, they're already in deep. So to be like, oh, like this too shall pass. They're like, I've been fucking waiting for it to pass.
Yeah.
Like they're past that. So, just that's a reminder for anybody. Also, just notice what life changes are happening for that person, whether it's like the things we've talked about already, which is like the job loss, separation, death, just whatever that thing is, and try to offer support in those times to help someone not get to this place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can feel, I've heard people say like, oh, I want to support this person, but I don't know how. And I think sometimes it's like, I don't know what to say. What will I say? I don't know what advice to give, or all those things. And I think that's very normal to experience that. But a lot of times what people need is just a presence, like just somebody to listen to them and to like be empathetic, meaning literally just like, sharing the experience with the person and holding that space for them to really share what they're going through. And you don't have to have the words. You do not have to have the words. And honestly, sometimes it's better to not have the words, to just be quiet and to listen and to just be a supportive presence for that person, instead of feeling like, oh, I have to reach for these phrases of like, this too shall pass, or like all the things to like make it feel lighter in your view.
Yeah.
And all that's really doing, like you mentioned, is really just kind of like minimizing or devaluing what they're going through. And same with when you try and like throw all the advice in and try and fix the whole thing. Like they've already done that. They've tried to fix all of this. They've tried to work through this through like a problem solving lens, at least on some level. That's not what they're needing right now. Like right now, they're just needing support and a caring presence.
Absolutely. It's the difference between like bearing witness to someone's pain and experience and just being able to like witness them at the altar of their pain versus feeling, and this is like such a human experience, especially for women. I totally understand this like on so many levels, sitting in our own discomfort and not solving it. Like it is not our job to fix this. It is literally beyond us.
Yeah.
It's in that moment, like you said, to just bear witness and offer love. I would say like, you know, we like totally underestimate how powerful it is to tell someone like, I love you.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
And I know maybe you're not that close with this person, or maybe you are, whatever that looks like, just saying like, I know if you aren't that close, saying, I know we're not that close, but I want to be here for you because I'd rather be here for you and grow our relationship than you not be on this planet.
Yeah.
And you know, that to just offer that and to say like, I'm here in this with you, or what can I do? You can ask questions, I think is a really powerful thing of just saying like, what would feel supportive to you right now? Whether that's a hug, just to sit there and be silent, whether that's to spend the night with them, whatever, like
tell jokes. Like I want you to give me advice. Maybe someone wants advice. Like,
right. Yeah. And if they invite that in, of course, that's totally different. But it's when we don't like create the space for the person to tell us what they really need, that can like, you know, maybe make them shut down or shy away from seeking help or moving forward with it all.
Yeah. And I think everything that we just talked about right there is applicable to someone in a state of like crisis or having suicidal thoughts, but also for the person who's struggling in different ways, but not necessarily at the point of having thoughts of taking their own life.
Yeah.
So just being a presence for someone, being genuinely curious about what they're going through, wanting to offer support in some way, even if that means asking, which is honestly the best route. Like, how can I support you? How can I walk with you through this? All of that applies to really any level of like struggling that someone's going through.
Yeah. Like on the spectrum of mental health, this is all applicable.
Yeah.
And, you know, like some resources or just like some tips for maybe the people who aren't necessarily in crisis, like, you know, if someone, you know, is struggling and it's not at the point of suicide, but they need help, that a great question to ask or a great resource is to say like, have you thought about a therapist? Would you like help finding one? You know, offering tools, like whether that be like, oh, you know, let's get you in a group, like whether that's going to AA or NA or some sort of support group, or, you know, just something nourishing. Let's go for a walk 3 times a week or twice a week or whatever. Like, let's start doing something that's breaking you out of the pattern, and just offering to help support them and getting the tools to get out of that funk. You know, and so it can be like so many different things, but those are just some tips on how to navigate that space for, you know, on the spectrum of all of this, like from the extreme, like in crisis to I'm struggling a bit and I don't know how to move through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then some things, just like some little tips, if you yourself are struggling with some mental health or emotional health issues right now, number one is reaching out. Like, and I know, like, I remember just listening to people, I think maybe this is like a common saying or common thing that is talked about in like the AA community or NA community is like the phone is like the heaviest thing for you. Like, but you need to pick it up. You need to call. You need to send the text, ideally call. And actually reach out to somebody.
Yeah.
And it feels like the hardest thing to do in that moment, but it's so impactful because you're actually opening yourself up to being seen and to being witnessed and to also being reminded that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. And so whether that be a friend, a family member, your spouse, if you don't have people like that, get yourself a therapist, get yourself a sponsor, a mentor, whatever that looks like. But like find someone to connect with, because otherwise it's just torture being in
Yeah.
isolation.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said that. Yeah. And then another thing is just do things that fill your cup, with pleasure and purpose. Like do things that feel really good. And even if the motivation isn't there, even if it's like the last thing I want to do is go for this walk,
Yeah.
find things that are really nourishing
Yeah.
and not self-harm, right? So,
Yeah.
it might and our brain might say like, oh yeah, like having that drink tonight would be really nourishing.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
sorry. It might feel good. You might get to check out,
Right.
but that's a different thing than, okay, what do I actually need to like get out of this and support myself through this season?
Yeah.
And find those things and kind of crowd those in. It's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
crowding in, what is supportive and nourishing for like
Yeah.
long-term sustainability versus like the quick, like, oh, I didn't think about that for a few hours, the quick checkout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think I would add too, like if you are currently feeling kind of like numb or apathetic or without motivation or depressed, like those symptoms, it's going to feel really hard to do these things that like bring you pleasure, because you might not be experiencing much pleasure.
Yeah.
But to challenge yourself to do it anyway, right?
Yes.
And to spend, even if it's just a few minutes of your time, like I'm going to peel myself off of this couch and do the thing that I usually do to find joy, or try something new. I'm going to paint, or I'm going to go for a walk. I never go for a walk. I'm going to try that out, see how it feels.
Yes.
And so to do it anyway, knowing that it's going to eventually help move the needle in the direction that you're wanting to go.
Yes, that's so important. Yeah, like I always say, this is like, being existentially spiraling on the couch doesn't feel nearly as good as existentially spiraling laying in the grass or looking at like going and being in nature.
Yeah.
Cause that is like, I really do think that getting in touch with like the natural world is one of the anecdotes like to all of
Oh, for
this.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. Like it helps combat this stuff.
Yeah.
And so like you said, peel yourself off the couch, get out of the dark room or the wherever you're at, get off your phone, throw your phone
Throw
out
it
the
away.
fucking window.
Yeah.
Literally, phones. That's a whole other episode. But throw your phone away
Yeah.
and go touch grass.
Yeah.
And I mean that on the most literal level. Like,
Yeah.
go physically be in grass, the beach, sand, wherever you are, whatever your environment is, go find a way to make connection with the natural world.
Yeah.
Even if it like feels like pulling teeth, like
Mhm.
just dig deep and do that little thing, even if it's for 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Mhm.
It's just a little interruption of the pattern and what that does for your brain and your nervous system regulation that
Mhm.
creates change.
Mhm.
So
No, absolutely. And sometimes, just on the note of like the little things to move yourself in the right direction, sometimes that means maybe your new baseline for things is way lower than what you're used to. And so maybe you're
yes.
not showering regularly. Maybe you're not like eating the same meals that you usually do, or your sleep is completely off. Like finding ways to just like, again, move the needle a little bit. Like I'm not going to tackle it all at once, but today I'm going to shower because it's been a few days. Like
Yeah.
just getting real with yourself of where you're at, and taking the next right step in the direction that you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. That reminds me of this, like if your pattern or like you said, if the bar is way lower than maybe what you're used to, also trying to find the like flow of the new normal.
Mhm.
And that like maybe you like to wake up really early, but right now you're in this phase you're in has you staying up really, really late. Just almost like a piece of advice I heard and I think is really important is to just kind of surrender to that and see how it feels. Because what happens when we resist it and it's like, no, I need to wake up at 7 a.m., but I did still go to bed at midnight.
Right.
Like I'm exhausted now. So instead, like just shift a little bit until you can get back to that
Yeah.
baseline. Just find those little shifts. So
Absolutely. I think too, compassion,
Yeah.
like having compassion for ourselves and just instead of resisting it or beating ourselves up or being like, I'm so flawed or I'm so broken or I need to be fixed and like all these different things that we might think to kind of beat ourselves up around the emotional experience that we're having, to try for a minute and think about the compassion that you would offer to somebody else, because it's
Yes.
much easier to offer compassion to somebody else and to see how it might feel like to try it on
Mm-hmm.
with yourself of what would it feel like even if just for a few minutes to offer myself some compassion and some understanding in the experience that I'm having instead of beating myself up because that's not working. So I
Yes.
think that again, just a little shift, even if it's temporary, can be so helpful.
I agree. I love that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Learning to like almost give yourself a hug, literally sometimes, like
Yeah.
whatever that thing is, just having, yeah, so much compassion and empathy and, normal, like, it's almost like surrendering to a degree. And I think that's tough because like when people hear surrender, it's like, oh, I'm going to surrender to this like struggle.
Yeah.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying surrender to like, this is happening
Yes.
and I'm going to name it to tame it and to move
Yeah.
through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anything else that I feel like we talked about so many good
I
things.
know. This was like such a this was a great episode. Yeah, really like good information and I'm proud of us. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say like for our listeners, whether it's yourself that's struggling or you know someone that might be struggling, be brave, have empathy, have compassion, talk to each other, ask questions. And you know, the more we can have these conversations and be aware,
Mm-hmm.
the closer we get to being able to like work through these things, move through these things as a society.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, all the things that just helps keep our show reaching more people. We appreciate you guys being here, and we will see you next week.